UK national organisation. I've been asked to talk about leadership skills for change in higher education. What I'd like to do, rather like Simon has done, is talk a little bit about what the Leadership Foundation does, what we were set up to do, and how we support and enable higher education institutions, individuals within those, and the organisations themselves to lead change. I'd also like to share some recent views that we've captured from senior leaders in UK higher education around the challenges and opportunities that they're currently facing. And you will already have heard quite a lot about that, so I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but it's quite interesting to see that there are some very common themes coming through the various presentations that you will have heard this morning. I'd quite like to check with you whether any of those resonate, whether you recognise any of those challenges from your own perspectives. And then I'd like to give some examples of some of the things that we're doing to support change and leaders working through change in higher education. I'll do some of that before lunch if there's time, and also after lunch. Looking also particularly at how we're involving and supporting students in the leadership and decision making through change in institutions. As well as working for the Leadership Foundation, I also run an innovation centre at the University of Bristol, and in both my roles have quite a number of partnerships with JISC, so there's quite a lot of similarities in some of the things that I might cover. And Simon has very usefully given an overview of the policy context for higher education, so I don't have to do that, so thank you very much for that. So the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education in the UK was established nearly 10 years ago, and I've been working with them for all that time. Our mission statement is there in the corner: Leadership and Organisational Development for Higher Education, Enabling Transformational Change. And we provide a dedicated service for leadership and organisational development for UK higher education. I'm not going to run through all our strategic objectives, and if you really want to read them, they are online, and you can see also this shared presentation later. But you'll see that at the heart of everything we do is leadership, change, innovation, and also governance, the governance of institutions. We have an extensive programme of development for governors in higher education as well. We are a membership organisation. So like JISC, we are owned by some of the national funding bodies: Higher Education Funding Council for England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, Universities UK, the representative body for Vice-Chancellors in higher education in the UK, and Guild HE. And from them we receive about 18% of our funding. The remainder of our funding is based on subscriptions, annual subscriptions that institutions pay to join the Leadership Foundation, and we have around 90% of UK higher education institutions in membership. It depends who you talk to as to how many institutions there are in the UK. It's anything between about 150 and 164, but regardless of what the figure is, we have 90% in membership. And the remainder of our funding then comes from individuals and organisations that pay to either have us come into their institution to work with them on a bespoke, tailored consultancy basis, or a range of programmes that we offer. So those are some of the things that we do to support leadership development in UK higher education. And Simon already pointed to some of our research publications. Again, these are all available free on our website. We fund a number of research projects every year around leadership, management and governance development in UK higher education, and also some international perspectives. Our founding chief executive retired at the end of last year, and we've just appointed a new chief executive, Dr. Mark Pegg, who's come from Ashridge Business School. That's rather cheesy photograph, if I can say that. I don't know whether that translates well into your languages, but actually I don't know what it would translate as, but unfortunate perhaps is the word. But just before he was appointed at the end of last year, he took some time to interview senior leaders in universities and colleges, so vice-chancellors, principals, rectors, provosts, and asked them what these particular questions. What are the leadership challenges for you in your institution? What are the challenges you think the sector as a whole is facing? What do you think we as the Leadership Foundation can do to help you, and what skills do you think you need, and how would you like, what's your learning preference in terms of developing those skills? So I just want to touch on some of the responses that he got. He collated those responses into these kind of categories. So challenges in the strategic landscape, which is what Simon talked about, the policy drivers and so on. And then things that came up through that. Organisational change, very much high on people's agenda. The student voice, again, as Simon has mentioned, a key part of this. Performance management, how do we get the best out of our people? How do we enhance their performance and organisational performance? How do we develop people? How do we engage more in innovation, take more risks? And how do we like to learn? And I'm not going to have time to talk about all of those, but I will just touch on some of them. So you'll have seen these themes emerge from previous presentations. But this is what senior leaders were telling us are the key challenges for them. So the financial constraints, change in models, the fee regime, competition, Simon has mentioned, performance, consumer demand, student as consumer, partnership opportunities, so this isn't just about challenges, it's about opportunities, and equality and diversity. We still have very low participation, particularly in senior roles in UK higher education from women, and very, very low participation from ethnic minorities, disabled people, and so on. And I'm just going to put up a couple of quotes that people have said during these interviews. One senior leader obviously said, it's lonely at the top. They're obviously feeling the stress of all these challenges and opportunities and unprecedented change. And one of the things that we can provide as a Leadership Foundation is a number of networks and development opportunities where they can come together, rather like you are doing, to share experiences and help and support each other through some of these changes. Organisation change was another big concern for people, and all sorts of different kinds of change. How do we respond to some of these challenges? Restructuring is a very popular activity in higher education, as it is in many other organisations, and sometimes is a sort of displacement activity for doing anything really concrete. It seems that we move people and structures around to show that we're doing something, whereas it doesn't necessarily actually improve things. But development of top teams to manage through change, particularly looking at staff engagement and cultural change. How do we, there are some changes that people will be resistant to. There are changes that have to happen very quickly. We have to be more agile. How do we ensure that our academic and support staff and our students engage with those changes and can see some of the positives as well as what feels like a lot of negativity? Our governance arrangements have changed over the last 10 years as well. We used to have very large governing bodies in universities and colleges, and those have been shrunk to a much more manageable size. But we're also seeing different breed of governors coming in with a mix of business, local people, students and staff governors. And their engagement is largely pro bono, they're not paid. And there is now a debate about whether we should be paying some of our governors to support the executive in universities. And another quote here, some faculty colleagues complain about creeping managerialism, and this particular Vice-Chancellor clearly thinks that managerialism isn't creeping, it's running through very quickly. And that is an issue of great tension in universities and a threat it's perceived to be to academic freedom and autonomy. Simon talked about innovation, particularly from a technology point of view. But Vice-Chancellors are seeing that we need to be far more innovative across a whole range of things that we do in higher education. As a sector, we are very conservative. We are very risk-averse. And actually, a number of Vice-Chancellors are now saying we need to increase our risk appetite. We need to understand risk much more and be able to take risks much more confidently. And that's something that we need to work with senior leaders and others across the sector to help them think about how they might manage risk more effectively. But change is happening very quickly, and some quite fundamental changes, both in terms of technologies, as Simon mentioned, but also the policy environment, and that managerialism and performance management, which means that people who came into institutions to teach, to research, are finding that their roles are changing. And that's the kind of work that, again, Simon mentioned by Celia Whitchurch. But this quote here, I hate to hear people say we're not allowed to do that. And there is in some cases, in some institutions, very much in the service side of things, a feeling that, oh, we've done that before, we tried it before, let's not do it again. And it's trying to lift people's thinking into something much more positive and constructive around leading and managing change. The student voice. Simon mentioned the student at the heart of the system, which was one of the major policy initiatives that we've seen come through in the last 4 or 5 years. And that notion of student as consumer is one that people are still struggling with and is very contested. Students are members of an institution, but they are paying fees, and then there is an equation in their mind, and particularly their parents' mind, about what they get for their money. And so we need to think about that in terms of the services we provide as well as the education that we provide to people. And this quote at the bottom, our thinking as leaders has not to be about blocking, but of ways of communicating better with students, and in this case, with the technology. But actually, I think we need to think of better ways of communicating with our students and engaging them more as co-creators rather than as either consumers or individuals to whom we do things. They are members of our institutions and have a part to play. So these Vice-Chancellors, how do they like to learn? Well, interestingly, no one mentioned any of the virtual stuff that they think we need to be engaging our students with. So they're not particularly keen on online learning. I'd be interested to know whether you like learning online. What they do like is the opportunity to network, to learn through doing, to learn from each other's experiences, coming together face to face, sharing best practice, hearing from others outside the sector, not just looking inward, but looking outward. And they're particularly keen to understand their own impact, their own personal leadership impact, and improve that where that's required. Get a better grip on strategic and operational issues. Again, coming back to performance management, I think there's a general consensus that across the sector we're not very good at handling difficult conversations where we have to help people improve or do things actually that they perhaps are very resistant to. And so those are some of the things that these senior leaders are particularly keen to address. So I'd just like to pause there for a moment, and if you've managed to take any of that in, I'd be interested to know whether any of that resonates with you. Do you recognise any of those challenges and opportunities from your own perspectives? Either the ways you like to learn or the things that you're facing. I can see you now. Any thoughts? Yeah?
The factors that you have listed at the beginning,
Yep.
they're all in parallel with what we're going
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it makes sense.
Have you got any tips for us?
Well,
Because we'd like to learn from other people.
I think in the afternoon we'll get together and find
Yeah.
out tips, right?
Yeah, no, I'd be very interested to hear if you've got any new ideas for addressing some of these challenges, because, yeah. Okay. And what about virtual learning? Do you do any of that yourselves, part of your professional development? No? No, neither do I, but I'm just quite interested. As a director of a learning and research technology centre, you think I would, but actually I hate online learning, but there you go. Okay, just before we break then, here are a few examples of the kinds of development opportunities that we provide to leaders in higher education. And when I say leaders, I don't just mean the top of the most senior leaders. We work with people right across higher education at all levels of management and leadership, both academic and support services. And we really have a notion that leadership is distributed and can come from anywhere in the institution. It isn't particularly dependent on having a particular job title or a role, although of course sometimes that happens. But actually creating innovation and new ideas sometimes comes most from the people that don't have those particular formal roles of leadership. Our top management programme does actually address senior leaders. This is for people who are aspiring to be vice-chancellors, the most senior person in the institution. And we run 3 of these, sometimes 4 a year, for around a dozen people each. And these are the component parts of what is essentially a year-long programme, which looks at strategic responses. International Week, they go to the US, EU, or in some cases Saudi Arabia, Dubai, places like that, to learn from what's happening in other countries, leading the high-performing organisation. And then there's a whole series of coaching and action learning that supports that programme throughout the year. And actually this quote here is from my own Vice-Chancellor at the University of Bristol, who says that this is exactly what you need to update skills and knowledge for a senior role. But we do, as I said, work with other leaders and managers across various roles. The Future Leaders programme is particularly for those people who aspire to leadership positions in IT departments, in libraries, in student services. And again, we bring those people together so that they can learn from each other as well as learn from us. And this is a particularly high-impact programme. We find that it's very transformational for people who go through it. And actually, that first quote is from someone who used to be my deputy at Bristol and is now... God, thank you. Can you hear me again now? Who has now moved on to an assistant director role somewhere else. Just put that back. And this is one of the programmes that we're running in partnership with JISC and other partners, called Changing the Learning Landscape. And this is particularly to help institutions on an organisational wide basis, as well as individual leaders and students, to think about how technology and changes in pedagogy and learning and curricula can change the learning landscape. And so it's got a number of strands: consultancy, projects, and development programmes for individuals. And we're about 6 months into this one, Simon, I think, and it's just been refunded again for a second cohort. And Change Academy is something that I know quite a lot about. I'm the lead person who delivers Change Academy for the Leadership Foundation. We work in partnership with the Higher Education Academy, who you may have heard of. And we run a national programme, a process really, as well as offering this as a process that can be undertaken in-house within an institution. And it's a different kind of, it's not a training or development program. It is an opportunity for change teams from within an institution to come together as a residential component to it, 3 or 4 days, where those teams really work through a particular change idea. And they're supported with various inputs from the Change Academy team to help them think creatively about what it is that they're trying to do. It's very, I don't know what it's like in your institutions, but in many of our UK higher education institutions, we have what are called the usual suspects. There are usual people on committees who, or in working groups, who undertake particular change initiatives. And what this tries to do is bring people from across an institution, so not the senior management, people who wouldn't normally work together, and that includes students, it includes stakeholders, employers, for example, if the project is about business engagement. And they work through their projects, they think about change, what change they're trying to achieve. And quite often we find that teams come in with a particular project in mind. They've already thought about it, they know what they want to try to achieve. And at the end of this process, they've kind of thrown that idea away because their thinking has been shifted. And they've realised that what they were trying to do was either not feasible or perhaps could be approached in a different way because they've got perspectives from people that they wouldn't normally work with. And one of the first things that we do on Change Academy is to ask people to draw a rich picture of what it is they're trying to achieve. And it's rather like a play, a children's game. You give them lots of paper and coloured pencils and magazines to cut pictures out from, and you have quite a lot of people thinking we're not children, we don't want to do this. But actually, in terms of the discussion of what the picture is that they draw, you find that they don't necessarily start out with a shared understanding of the change that they're trying to achieve. And so it's quite a powerful way of getting people different perspectives on the change that they're trying to achieve, to draw it or represent it in some way, and share that with other teams in the Change Academy. And actually having to articulate in that way what it is that they're trying to achieve can be a really powerful way of thinking about a change initiative. And there are a whole range of other things that we do throughout. And you'll see there's lots of post-it notes and flip charts and very low technology approaches to the Change Academy, but it has some very powerful outcomes. So I think I'll stop there and carry on after lunch with some other examples. Okay.
Any immediate questions for Leslie on time? Hey, Leslie is kindly agreed to join us this afternoon as well, so we can